In the previous video, we graphed investment spending, and we found investment spending looked like this, a horizontal line. And since we're graphing it versus national income, and investment spending is not changing, then that means investment spending is autonomous and not induced. In the example we've been working with, we found that investment spending was equal to 75. There was no second half to our formula, which is the induced portion. So let's talk about why that is. Why doesn't investment spending depend on income? Well, let's talk about what is investment spending. Investment spending is when businesses buy from other businesses. So if you think back, investment spending includes 4 things. That's businesses buying capital goods. That's businesses buying residential structures, non-residential structures, and inventory. So when do businesses do this? When do businesses buy additional locations and additional machines? Well, they do this not so much based on the current income, but on what they expect to happen. And so investment spending is independent of the current income level. So we want to look at what actually determines investment spending. Well, our expectations about the future, businesses are optimistic, the economy is doing well, and so they should expand because they can take advantage of that. That's going to change investment spending. Or if they can borrow money on the cheap so that they can afford to expand, afford to get more machines. So interest rates are going to have a much bigger impact on the level of investment spending than the current level of income in the economy. And so when we talk about changes in interest rates and expectations about the future, these things are actually going to shift our graph up or down, depending on whether they increase or decrease investment spending. But our investment spending does not depend on the current size of the income in our economy. It doesn't depend on national income. Investment spending is also more volatile than consumption spending. If businesses expect the economy not to do well, then they can postpone a lot of investment spending. So, for example, you could wait and not expand your business currently. You could make do with some existing equipment and limp along until it's cheaper to buy or when the future looks better. So investment spending, because a lot of it can be held off, you can determine when it happens, then it's not really dependent on the level of income in the economy. So let's look at the determinants of investment spending. What would cause the investment function, which we found here was I equals 75, to shift up or down? So let's go through these. Let's start with a change in interest rates. Okay. If interest rates go up, then it's more costly to borrow money, and therefore investment spending will decrease or shift down. If interest rates go down, it's cheaper to borrow money, and so businesses are more likely to expand, to buy more machines and inventory, and so investment spending will increase. The second thing that changes investment spending is a change in the price of capital goods. So here we're looking at, okay, now let's say we're Quiznos, and we've been thinking about upgrading our equipment that toasts the sandwiches. Okay, so we're going to wait and look when the price of the toaster machine, what's happening with those prices. So we're going to wait and we're going to decide if the purchase is worthwhile depending on what's happening to the price of the toaster equipment. Is it worth the purchase? Is it worth the price? How does it impact profitability? Okay. The third determinant of investment spending is a change in the age of capital goods. Well, if you're Quiznos and your toaster machine is now old, maybe it's not toasting as well as it should be or it used to be, then you're going to go and get a new toaster for your Quiznos location, and so investment spending is going to go up. Businesses also look at the amount of spare capacity. Spare capacity is essentially your warehouse, places to store your goods that you have made. If you have no spare capacity, so you have nowhere to store the goods that you have made, then you're going to need to do some investment spending and build another warehouse or location. We also have to look at your expectations about the future. Are you confident that the economy is going to do well? Are you concerned that it's not? If businesses are optimistic, so they're expecting the economy to do better, then they're more likely to expand, upgrade equipment, and so on. One of the biggest hurdles to getting out of a recession is the expectations and the confidence of both consumers and businesses. You'll recall that consumer confidence was one of those that impacted consumption spending. And here we have business expectations. So if businesses are optimistic and consumers are optimistic, then both businesses and consumers will start buying more goods now, and that's going to ultimately increase demand and increase the size of the economy, stimulate the economy, and get us out of a recession. So you have lots of politicians who are constantly trying to create optimism, talking about how much things are getting better. And it's because they're trying to change those business expectations to increase investment spending, and they're trying to change the consumer expectations to get households buying, and it's that will increase the spending and ultimately increase income as well. The last thing that changes investment spending is government regulations. The more red tape or bureaucracy, the more hoops that businesses have to jump through, the more investment spending is going to decrease. So what's currently happening when it comes to investment spending? Well, we can look at an article that came out about a year ago, and this talks about how investment spending is at the lowest it's been in the last 40 years. So we're not really going to get a whole lot of economic growth unless we can get investment spending up. If more businesses are going to build additional buildings and locations, get additional equipment, increase their inventory levels, only then will we start to get bigger growth. But right now, investment spending has been lagging. If we go back to our notes here, for the example that we've been looking through, we have found that consumption spending, so we found consumption spending was 5 plus 0.6y, and we found that investment spending is 75. So we're building towards our aggregate expenditures, our total spending, and so the first part of the aggregate expenditure function is C plus I. So we can find C plus I by adding up our formulas for investment spending and consumption spending. What we do is we add up the numbers in each of the formulas that don't contain a Y. So notice investment spending is just 75 and consumption spending formula has a 5 in that formula. So 75 plus 5 gives us 80. Then we add up the parts of the formulas that contain Y's, and in this case that's only in the consumption function, so we get 0.6y. So C plus I is 80 plus 0.6y, and then we're going to start to add G and X minus IM. We can plot C plus I. So remember, investment spending, I equals 75, was a horizontal line. Consumption spending, because it was both autonomous and induced, started here at 5 and went up. We spend 60 cents of every dollar of income. And so then if we add the investment spending to the consumption spending, we're just shifting up that consumption function by 75. So we have C plus I. Now we need to look at G and X minus IM.